What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be talking about translucent humanoids and faceless entities. Now, translucent humanoid being the Glimmer Man or the predator entity, right? And I've been talking a lot lately about how I think that I have a sneaking suspicion that there are at least 3 different types of Glimmer Man entities or translucent humanoid entities based on facts and evidence that I've seen from encounters that I've read, my encounter, and just things I've come across. So this is part 1, encounters, because I'm going to have the basics coming up as part 2 because I'm still doing my research, but I wanted to give some encounter stories because you guys seem to really like those, and you also seem to be very interested in the Glimmer Man. Faceless entities is added in here because I couldn't find enough Glimmer Man encounters that I thought were credible at the time of writing this script. Guys, a lot of you are complaining about my reading. I'm really sorry. It does make it go faster, but I understand your complaint. So going forward, give me a little time. I'm redoing my whole setup again. I'm gonna have the green screen. I'm going to try to get the teleprompter. I'm gonna hook it up, but it's going to take me a little time. So I didn't used to read, and now I'm reading only because it makes things go faster, but I realize how that could be kind of annoying to some people. I'm doing the best I can, as always. I just came from Oracle reading over on Oracles and Beyond with Cassie. Steve was there, Carol XO, and I've also been doing personal Oracle readings for people, and then on Wednesday nights, the live stream on this channel with me and Steve Stockton, Stemma, he and I read Oracle cards for like 3 hours to pretty much whoever comes in. We have like a little list. We each do like 13. So that's kind of why I've got all my jewelry on, but also the turquoise jewelry, the moonstone jewelry. It's all very comforting to me. So yeah, I might be incorporating some oracle reading, astrological oracle reading into my channel, but I'm really not sure. So who knows? I guess I'll keep you updated on that. So let's jump right in. Whether you want to call them Glimmer Man, translucent, or shimmering entities, or the predator entity, I'm sure by now most of us have heard one story or another about someone who has encountered this thing in the woods, or, as in my case, near or kind of in some woods. I've already told my encounter in a video I did so long ago that I'm debating on just kind of telling it again in a newer video, or as just one encounter story of many in my personal encounters video series, which I'm working on now and which is coming soon. That's going to be just like listener encounters, but it's going to be a personal collection of my paranormal, supernatural, strange, bizarre, unexplained experiences that I've had throughout my life, which is as far back as I can remember since I was like 4 years old. So it's going to be a series. So there is no Wikipedia page for this thing yet, meaning the Glimmer Man or the faceless entity really, but I'm sure one is coming as the accounts are becoming more and more frequent and widespread, and I'm really not surprised. After all, if one approached me and my toddler in the middle of the afternoon, extremely close to a main road, and in northern New Jersey of all places, I can't even imagine how many encounters there are happening deep in the woods to hikers, campers, and hunters who just haven't gotten up the courage to go public yet. I also believe that a lot of people don't necessarily remember they've had an encounter with either the Glimmer Man or the faceless entity, although this seems to be quite uncommon in many, if not most, of the encounters we're hearing about lately, of which there are so many more just in the past few months alone. I mean, how in the world would we ever know until the person remembers? Who knows how long that could even take? With all of that being said, and one more reminder that to hear mine or Steve's Glimmer Man encounter, just check out our channels or come into a live stream and ask us to tell it again. Here are a few more of these Glimmer Man encounters. I must say though, it's kind of a relief. I sometimes selfishly think that now I don't have to feel so alone, and I know I wasn't imagining things with the Glimmer Man, you know? I've also come across in my very tiring research accounts of people who have not only seen this translucent or glimmer entity, but also more and more I'm seeing people reporting coming across strange human-shaped entities without a face. Like, yeah, that's literally the only way I can think to explain this to you guys. But below you'll find the encounters, and as always, it's up to you to decide if this video is for your own entertainment purposes, or if you should start being more aware of your surroundings, because more and more every day there is some sort of weird, almost never heard of or seen before humanoid entity sort of creature stalking us, not just in the woods, but wherever we go. I personally choose to go with the latter, better prepared for the worst in case the worst happens. In the fall of 1978, during deer season, in a small town called Suchez, Georgia, which at that time had only a population of maybe 1,000, a hunter had an encounter with one of these predator entities. I'm doing research into a theory, as I've stated above, that there are at least 3 and most likely more of these so-called Glimmer Man entities, one which is alien, another which is government, and another still which actually heals human beings' illnesses. But that isn't what we're here for, so just kind of keep it in the back of your minds, though, if you will, because there will be more to come on that. So anyway, this town is at the southeast end of Chattahoochee National Forest. This person describes himself as, quote, an avid hunter, end of quote, and says he was hunting on public land in the national forest. He knew where a water source was called Bryant's Creek, and as he had just scouted the area a few months beforehand in the summer, he also says he knew where all the game trails, ridges, and gaps were. He was very familiar with this area as he had been hunting in it for many years. He explains how he set up his lock on a tree stand about 12 feet off the ground as he thought he had found the perfect place to be able to get himself a large buck. He trimmed the branches to be able to get himself, quote, some shooting lanes, end quote, and he set out to get this buck. Because rifle hunting wasn't allowed in the area, he was using a 12-gauge shotgun. On a not particularly special day in November, the man went back to this tree stand, and as he had at least 6 times before between when he set it up and when this encounter took place, nothing unusual or unnatural was going on. It was around 4:15 p.m. and he was following his normal routine of leaving work and going directly to the woods to hunt for buck. His wife knew not to expect him before 8:30 and even later if he had actually gotten something. From where he parked at the trailhead to where his tree stand was about a 25-minute or so walk. He says he was walking as quickly as he could while also keeping in mind not to go too fast so as not to scare off all of the wildlife, most of which have superior hearing to us humans. Here's where things started getting weird. Weird to him and maybe to some of you, but I'm guessing not to most of you if you are an avid follower of either my channel, Missing Persons and Mysteries, or both. Also, if you're a STEMA fan, as we talk about this all of the time, and many of you had written in or just told us how you've had this exact same thing happen to you right before you had an encounter or experience with something supernatural and or paranormal. It's very creepy, though, in my opinion, when it happens in the woods. I know this for sure because it's exactly what happened to me right before I had my own Glimmer Man encounter. Everything in the woods was quiet, but it was like it was too quiet though. Eerily quiet and also unnaturally still. No wind blowing, no leaves falling, no squirrels playing or birds chirping, nothing at all. It's like the entire forest went dead silent. The guy says that though he found this a bit strange, he didn't give it too much thought and continued on his way into his stand. He was determined to get himself a buck that day and was trying not to let all the weirdness distract him from his main purpose and goal, which was that buck. He got up into his stand and started surveying the area, one round in his shotgun with the safety on. He was, in the back of his mind and not even realizing it, not only looking for a buck, but also for anything out of the ordinary or anything that might have been out of place. He was keeping an eye out for antlers, as he said sometimes during the day the deer would bend down, and that's pretty much all you could see of them coming out of the tall grass, just antlers sticking up and standing out. All of a sudden, though, this hunter said that it was the strangest thing. He suddenly felt like he was the one being hunted, or at least that he was being watched. It was an ominous feeling. He says, quote, I don't know how to explain it other than I had this deep feeling deep within me, in my core, in my gut, something wasn't right, end of quote. Try as he may, though, he simply couldn't ignore it and began to get very annoyed with himself for, quote, being such a coward, end of quote. The feeling intensified more as time went on and night started to fall. He began to contemplate leaving early as something told him he didn't want to be there at dusk. Something deep within him, his human primal instincts, were telling him to get out of there before dusk hit. He explains that as he was arguing with himself about whether or not to leave early, his peripheral vision caught something moving to his right within the trees. He slowly turned his head and began looking through the tree canopy and says he can hardly explain what it was he saw. He describes it as, quote, what looked to be a large bodybuilder but completely blurry and moving through the trees, end of quote. He could see very clearly that this was a humanoid but nothing else, as everything besides the general shape was blurry. He said, quote, it looked like a clear gelatinous blob but in the shape of a large human, end of quote. The thing must have been blending perfectly into the background because whenever it would stop moving, it would seemingly become invisible to him. He watched it for about 15 minutes, though he says it seemed more like an eternity, and he claimed it, quote, moved effortlessly through the trees like a monkey or a squirrel, end of quote. He says he never even saw it look his way once he saw it, but had the distinct feeling that it was watching him until he started watching it. Eventually it was gone, having moved out of his line of sight, and this is when he remembered the long walk back to his truck, alone, at nighttime, and he was terrified. After getting home, he didn't immediately tell anyone, and as time passed by, he kept trying, but couldn't ever convince himself it was just his imagination, as eventually when he finally told his wife about it, that's exactly what she said it must have been. He knows better though, and still to this day can't explain it any better than he has here. What was it he was seeing? He was so scared he never even went back to those woods to get his tree stand, which he claims cost him like $300. He said he had no reasonable or rational explanation as to what it was he was seeing, but felt he gained a bit of understanding, not to mention shock, when a few years later in 1988, he saw the movie The Predator. He says he jumped up and yelled to his wife, quote, that's it, that's what I saw, end of quote. He wondered if perhaps whoever wrote that movie had some kind of similar encounter with one of these entities and was perhaps then inspired to turn it into a movie script. I don't know, it makes sense to me, and I actually never thought about that because I always thought that the government gives these secrets sometimes to Hollywood people so that if something were to happen, like a Glimmer Man encounter, we as humans would not only have something to liken it to, hey, that's the thing from that Arnold movie, but also perhaps we should just be a tiny bit less fearful having seen something like this before. Also, if the government gives the secrets to people who can keep them and write a movie about it, right? And if someone's like, I saw the Predator entity, people are going to be like, you've seen that movie too many times, you know, stuff like that, making people think they're going nuts. I believe this, mind you, though I haven't seen the movie and am told that knowing this is what we are seeing would surely bring no comfort at all. This man, named James, said he also doesn't know whether it makes him feel better or worse that he is now realizing he isn't alone, and that many other people have encountered this entity, and so many are finally coming out with their encounters in the past year or so. That's kind of what I said, like, I kind of guiltily feel like, oh wow, it's not just me. Our next encounter is from a truck driver we'll call Jim, who says he is from Indianapolis, Indiana, and was on his way to Illinois one night in his rig, heading east along Interstate 80. He had just had a good 8-hour sleep, so he knew what he saw wasn't due to exhaustion or his eyes being too tired from staring at the road all day and night. As he was driving, he says he saw something really strange, again, out of the corner of his eye, and he goes on to explain in more detail. I was horrified when I read this encounter, but what made me even more terrified was how many encounters I came across of this same exact thing in all different places and situations all across the world when I finally got around to researching it. The fact that this is happening all over the place, like, not that it's much worse than the Glimmer Man, but for some reason, I don't know. So anyways, back to Jim. It was dusk when the sun was just about setting as he drove along I-80 eastbound, and he was fresh as a daisy from a shower and a full day's sleep. He saw something suddenly on the side of the road, and he went out of his way to explain that it wasn't like in the grassy areas leading into the woods we so often see on the sides of highways once the concrete and lines end. No, this thing had its toes literally right there standing on the white line of the shoulder of the highway. Jim said he started to slow down because he couldn't understand what he was seeing, but decided whatever it was big enough, he didn't want to hit it and should probably slow down to avoid hitting it. Once he got down to 50 miles per hour, he could see what it was much better and much more clearly, and this is when the initial shock kicked in. He had his high beams on and realized it was a man of sorts, or at least that's what it looked like at first glance. The height of the man was about 5 foot 10 inches, or a little less, and Jim stated that it couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds soaking wet. Once he got just a little bit closer, this man looked up and had no nose, no mouth, no eyes, no nothing, no face at all. Jim said, quote, there was no orifice on his face, end of quote. Completely featureless and also hairless. The man thing didn't even have any lips. pale white skin and at this point staring directly at Jim. Jim's mama apparently didn't raise no fool because he admits that at that point, when he saw it dead on like that, he slammed on the gas and didn't stop until he hit Chicago. Before we move on to the next account, I want you all to picture in your head the creepypasta, what I think has definitely become a tulpa all over the world, Slender Man. This is the kind of face we are talking about here when we say Faceless. The next encounter is from an anonymous person who says he and a few of his friends used to just drive around their hometown at night through all of the lonely back roads surrounded by and winding through desolate forests and empty fields near the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia, Canada. Of the hundreds of nights these guys decided to go out and do this just for fun and not really expecting much to happen, this night was definitely different and gave them what they were out looking for, a thrill, but not in the right way. It left them scarred, traumatized, and scared. Here's what he had to say. When they were driving up in some hills one night, they were about 5 miles from the nearest house and who knows how many miles from the nearest anything, they came around a blind corner up a hill and around. As they turned this blind corner, they saw what appeared to be a little old lady just walking there on the side of the road. There are no sidewalks here, and this was extremely dangerous because had they been driving any faster, they could have hit and possibly killed or really hurt her. She was hunched over a bit and wearing a long coat and some kind of shawl or like hood-like thing. One of the friends started to nervously laugh like, "What the hell?" and then pondered out loud to the others if they should stop and offer this little old lady some assistance or help. The driver of the car slowed down and approached her, rolling down his window and ready to ask if she needed a ride or some help, if she was lost, or if she needed any kind of help at all out there all alone on this lonely, desolate road, walking along in a very precarious spot, almost in the middle of the road. As they came up beside her, however, that's when they saw it. She had no face at all. Just, quote, a big gray hole where her face should be, end of quote. Same as the last encounter and so many more I have since come across. No features, no hair, just nothing at all. I get the chills just thinking about encountering something like this. Needless to say, these young kids too took off and never looked back. They could think of no possible explanation for what they saw, but did note the time as being the usual, between 3 and 4 a.m. The usual meaning for paranormal and supernatural activity. The witching hour, kind of, around 3-ish. Everyone saw the same thing, and nobody was under the influence of any substances, beverages, or chemicals at the time of the sighting either. Our last encounter is another Glimmer Man or translucent humanoid encounter. Just know I am nowhere near done with my encounter series on either of these two entities or the forest entities or anything else Steve and I have been trying to expose since we started working together. You guys will be so surprised with how much information we have come across, but also it's like no matter how much these stories are all seemingly the same, how incredibly different some of them seem to be. Keep that in mind for this particular encounter, as it definitely combines two of my most dreaded fears. A woman in Brighton, England was sleeping comfortably in her bed one night in July of 1988 when all of a sudden she woke up with a very strange and spasm-like sensation running through her entire body. Can I just point out that this is another encounter with the Glimmer Man or translucent humanoid that takes place in the 80s. So this thing is not anything new. And I think the reason I was having so much trouble finding anything on it, like after I had my encounter and like dove into research, is because I was looking for something recent. I found so many encounters going back to the 60s with this thing. Anyway, she was completely paralyzed, like in a sleep paralysis encounter, only I'm not sure which is worse. The usual shadow people or sleep paralysis demons we always encounter and see during these episodes, or the fact that she was completely wide awake and could only move her eyes. She remembered how it felt like something had crawled on top of her and was weighing heavily there in her body, especially her chest, as she was having trouble breathing from the pressure that was there because of whatever this was crushing her. She also felt the feeling that there were hands around her throat, choking her. The entity was breathing in her ear and letting out low and guttural growling noises she could hear right next to her face as the hands slowly applied more and more pressure around her throat. She was able to move her eyes, and so she did, and here is what she describes as she looked over to the side where the whispering and growling was coming from. She could hardly see it, but it was like a large and elongated face right there next to hers. She saw the figure on top of her clearly now and explained it as a kind of, quote, lizard or newt-like creature, end of quote. She wasn't sure if it was blending in with the room around it, with its surroundings there, or if it was cloaked by something, rendering it almost completely invisible. This woman claims that in her head was suddenly the thought to stand up to this thing, so she growled at it and bared her teeth. She felt it inside her head, crawling through her thoughts and memories, and she started shouting obscenities at it and making growling and all kinds of animalistic and inhuman noises to try and scare the thing off and intimidate it. And she wanted it out of her sight and out of her home. She was unsure whether it had violated her in any way. After all, it was crawling on top of her in bed in the middle of the night, grunting, so who knows? She was paralyzed completely, so wouldn't have felt anything if it was doing something that terrible to her. But she felt violated and she felt used, and that was enough for her. She was angry, and in the blink of an eye, the thing was off her bed and standing at the bottom of her bed, with the moonlight spilling through a small gap in the curtains behind it. This helped to illuminate it and bring into a clearer view what she was seeing. She realized right away, however, that this wasn't the moonlight which was illuminating this reptilian-like beast. Oh no. The lights were described as all different shades of gold and with smaller particles of something that possibly was dust or maybe not, swirling around inside of it, helping to further show her what had been on top of her and in her bed with her. It was a 6-foot-tall reptilian creature who was emanating a sense of happiness and perhaps even pride. As the creature walked forward into where the light now was, its reptilian arms and legs disappeared into the bright and golden, unnatural illumination as each part touched it, so it disappeared seemingly into thin air. As the figure slowly disappeared and was finally gone, the woman said that's when she realized that it did in fact sexually assault her, and she was really sick to her stomach at this point. This explains the look and feeling of happiness and pride she felt emanating off of it for a minute there. It's like that was its way of letting her know what it had done and how it felt about itself afterwards. Good job, buddy. It was pure and total evil and something I would never want to experience because I don't know where that strength came from to stand up to it like that. And I'm not so sure I would have that instinct, but who knows? I'm more of a play dead and pray it doesn't actually kill me type of woman, but that's just me. That's all I have for you today, guys. Just kind of a short part 1 encounters videos. I have a lot of part 2s coming out that I'm working on from a series I've already started. I also have some part 3s, right? I am so excited about all of the new series and your guys' reaction to them. Thank you so much for your patience and tolerance of my constant research and kind of switching around what I'm talking about. But I know you guys are loving the content because the comments have been so incredibly amazing. 99.99% of the time, right? Can't please everybody. So guys, yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. I know some of you have seen what I've been doing with the oracle readings. If you want a private reading, just email me. And also, if you have any encounters with the supernatural and or paranormal that you want to be a part of my listener encounter series, please email any of that stuff to GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. I will do my best to get back to you as quickly as possible, but you're going to have to be patient with your girl. I don't know if I'm going to be incorporating astrological once a month oracle readings, but I want to do something with it. I kind of feel like I need to. I'm feeling the calling to put that on my channel. So we'll see how it goes. You guys can definitely let me know your thoughts, worries, issues, opinions, or your thumbs up for that. It's just a quick little video to get you guys all amped up for what is to come, right? Check out any of our live streams Wednesday nights right here on this channel. Steve Stockton and I, Sema, are doing oracle readings for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours starting at 7 p.m. Eastern time and going right along from there. I hope you guys will come in and join us. There will be links in the description box for that, and also links in the description box, as always, justice for Caleb Smith. We need to get some justice into that case so April can stop investigating her own son's death. And when I say April, most of you will know I mean April Arrington. She's a friend of the channel. She's become family. She is part of our island of misfit toys, but we need to get her some justice. No parent should have to investigate the death of their own child because the police don't feel like doing their job and because cowards don't want to come forward. You can check out the interview with her. It's 2 hours. It was done on Missing Persons and Mysteries back in April or May. trying to set something else up to maybe get an update from April, even if we can't do the podcast. We're not sure how that's going to go, but anyway, Justice for Caleb Smith, please check it out if you haven't already. Also, the Wednesday night live stream, as I just said. Friday nights, Campfire Stories. It's myself and Steve Stockton over on Missing Persons and Mysteries, and we start at 7 p.m. Eastern Time and usually go through till 8 or 9 Eastern Time again. But we've been having a panel of people. We've been having subscribers come on. We've been having friends of the channel, people who are always in the live stream come on. So you never know actually who's going to be there. Just that it's me and Steve and whoever else decides to come on in and has something to say. So we think that's been a lot more interesting. And you guys totally agree. And then on Sunday night, Steve Stockton and I also do Fireside Chat on Missing Persons and Mysteries, and that's from 7 to 8-ish p.m. Eastern Time as well. Check out the links if you want. There will also be links to my PayPal and Patreon, ways to donate financially to the channel. I am doing free oracle readings as well as early exclusive content for all Patreon members every single month, starting last month, actually, well, this month, August. And I'm also going to do it for the people who want to donate through PayPal for that month as well. So going forward, channel memberships, there's a lot going on, guys. I am super swamped with work, but I'm super happy to be that way. Guys, always be kind to each other. Be kind to yourself. That's just as important. Always go in grace. Have your best day. Have your best night. I will definitely see you next time. I'll see you in the comments section. Stay sexy, stay safe, stay strong, and stay spooky. Bye-bye.